So here's a 2-for-1 on a very popular Anglo-Catholic devotional called the St. Augustine's Prayer Book. Now we have 2 editions out here on the market. We first have the 2014 edition, rather the revised edition, published by the Reverend David Cobb and published by Forward Movement on behalf of the Order of the Holy Cross. And then we have the 1967 revised edition, edited by the Reverend Loren Gavitt, published by Holy Cross Publications. Now, off the bat, these are for different versions of the prayer book. The 2014 edition is more suited for those who use the 79 prayer book or the 2019 ACNA prayer book. And you have the 67 revised edition, which is more suited for the 1928 prayer book. So let's just dive right in. First, we're going to go to the 2014 revised edition. Let's go to the table of contents here. As you can see, it has everything and anything that is not in the Book of Common Prayer, including Eucharistic devotions, topical devotions, litanies, the Holy Hour. It has the Holy Eucharist, confession, daily prayer, instructions. Opens up with this poem, which I really love. Remember, Christian soul, that today and every day you have God to glorify, Jesus to imitate, salvation to work out with fear and trembling, a body to use rightly, sins to repent, virtues to acquire, hell to avoid, heaven to gain, eternity to hold in mind, time to profit by, neighbors to serve, the world to enjoy, creation to use rightly, slights to endure patiently, kindness to offer willingly, justice to strive for, temptations to overcome, death perhaps to suffer, and in all things God's love to sustain you. Jumps right into the obligations, which does quote the Book of Common Prayer. Has rubrics such as time of prayer, rules for abstinence, church seasons, has a little catechism, also in the front, such as the works of mercy, Sermon on the Mount, and it jumps right into common prayers. Now, it gives, if you can see, both forms of the Lord's Prayer. The traditional language and the contemporary language. And several versions of the Gloria Patri. The open acclamations usually say the Eucharist. The Angelus. Now, in a previous video, I showed you the Angelus written in the Practice of Religion by the Reverend Campbell Knowles. What makes this one different? This includes the Pray for Us, O Holy Mother of God, that we may be made worthy of the promises of Christ. This technically does depart from the Anglican canons, as the articles say intercession of the saints is not to be sought. But here we go. And I said this is an Anglo-Catholic prayer book, so it significantly takes a lot from Roman Catholicism, Oxford movement, and even Orthodoxy, as I will show you in a little bit. Jumps into condensed forms of morning prayer, which I have said when on the go or when I don't have access to my prayer book and Bible. These are very good to say when going about your busy days. And it includes the morning litanies, Even has what I have found helpful is suggested canticles for when you use the 79 prayer book. The morning litany, jumps in to short midday prayers, some collects for noon, goes into condensed evening prayer, more evening collects, and then a shortened form of Compline. Now, those who use the older prayer books, Compline is not in office in the Book of Common Prayer until you get to the 1979 and the 2019 edition used by the ACNA. But here we have a shortened form of Compline, which I have found very helpful. Moving right along through this, we have various prayers. For holy fear, for faith, intercessions, prayers for the lonely, prayers for parents, prayers for priests, prayers to ask of the saints, even. I'm going to skip a little bit more into reconciliation. Now, what I love with this, and I actually just myself use this when I went to my first confession in the Episcopal Church before I went and started my discernment. I actually used this examination of conscience, the prayers associated with it. Now, here's the self-examination, which uses the 7 deadly sins. It has, for example, a sin of pride. It has more subdivisions of it, such as irreverence, presumption, distrust, disobedience. It's very good when you're examining your conscience before you receive your confession. And then it has a prayer after your examination, prayers before you go into confession with your priest. It has a version of confession. This follows Form 1 in the prayer book, which is by far my favorite form. I'll zoom in a little bit. It has prayers after confession. Keep in mind, the Episcopal Church does not believe in giving penance out, as in general we believe that if you're seeking confession, the Lord has already forgiven you in your heart. That this is, in a way, a form of therapy. At least that's how it's been explained to me. It has other penitential prayers. And it goes right into the Eucharist. Now this version here follows the 1979 prayer book to a T. It has the preparatory Psalms, which is a Roman borrowing. It has the prayers of St. Ambrose and the prayer of St. Thomas Aquinas, as well as prayers we said in the church right before the liturgy begins, such as prayers to the Blessed Virgin Mary, prayers to St. Joseph, prayers to the Company of Heaven, a collect from the prayer book, and it dives right in to the Eucharist. It has the optional processional, prayer for the acolytes, the asperges in Vidi Aquam, and this is mostly rubrics, which is a bit of a disappointment, but the idea is that you're supposed to have your prayer book on hand during the Mass. So it gives rubrics on the entrance rite, and it gives a couple of suggested prayers to be said. Now the offertory. Now we're going to start seeing some borrowing from other liturgies. So You have the rubrics on the offertory and some prayers, such as this one. This comes from the Coptic Orthodox Church, as well as some collects from the Liturgy of St. Basil. There's a little bit of a story with the use of Orthodox prayers in our devotional lives. Thanksgiving after communion. See, this is chock full of several prayers. Now, for those who like to pray the rosary, in a lot of the older prayer books, this is not a thing. Skip past the seasonal devotions to the devotions to the Blessed Virgin Mary. Now, I grew up Roman Catholic, and we love our rosaries. We would say them during the month of May in grade school, all the time. And it's something I missed when going Episcopalian, but I haven't had to worry. St. Augustine's prayer book has that covered with the antiphons and a whole section just dedicated to the rosary. Has method, and it gives the mysteries. Now it gives the standard 3 mysteries, joyful mysteries, glorious and sorrowful, but it also includes mysteries of obedience, which are the baptism of Christ, the temptation in the wilderness, the transfiguration, his anointing at Bethany, and the institution of the Last Supper, and the mysteries of grace, which is based on the scriptural passage, such as the water turned to wine, the living water, bread of life, light of the world, and the resurrection of the life. This does not include the luminous mysteries, as not many Episcopalians who pray the rosary recognize them. I should also note that this does omit the Fatima prayers, as has become the unofficial part of the Roman Catholic devotionals in the rosary, but Episcopalians generally follow the traditional rosary. This is another borrowing from the Orthodox Church, a Greek Orthodox anthem to the Theotokos. It has the Litany to the Blessed Virgin, the other Litany to the Blessed Virgin, and the Litany to Our Lady of Sorrows. Skip a little bit. Devotions to the Angels. Now, a section I've used a few times is Holy Hour. Now, what the Holy Hour is in the ideal world, you were supposed to spend time alone before the Blessed Sacrament or in a chapel. Now, this is very common on Maundy Thursday, where we pull what's called Gethsemane Watch. Some also call it the 3 churches, where you sit in adoration, either in the presence of the Blessed Sacrament or in the stripped chancel, and you offer prayers as a way to commemorate Christ in the garden and his apostles. So this has the steps in it, readings from Scripture, portions of the Psalms, hymns from Thomas Aquinas, and it just walks you through everything you're supposed to focus on Holy Hour. And I said this can be done in church, but I've done it at home sometimes. It's just been me. If you love the 79 prayer book, I recommend getting this one. I'm moving right along. Just myself. The 1962 revision of the original one by the Reverend Loren Gavitt, which was originally printed and published in 1947. Now, this version follows the 1928 prayer book and, to an extent, the Anglican Missal. Now, both of these are published by Holy Cross. For those who don't know, the Order of the Holy Cross is a monastic group in the Episcopal Church that follows the rule of St. Benedict. So we open up to this very beautiful painting engraven of St. Augustine. It opens to the Christian's obligations, which are based on the Book of Common Prayer, the Church Canon, and even Catholic use. Shows the whole discipline. Eucharistic fast. First you have lay baptism, which tells you how to baptize in emergency situations. Then it goes to the common forms of prayer, which is the Lord's Prayer, the Angelic Salutation, the Gloria Patri, the Apostles' Creed, and the Confiteor, which is from the Tridentine Mass that we have borrowed. Gives a form of grace before meals, a Thanksgiving after meals, and it jumps into condensed morning prayers. Now, this is significantly different from the 2014 in that it opens with the Our Father, the Hail Mary, and the Creed. Has intercessions, to Thanksgiving, collects, and it jumps right into the Benedictus. And then the morning litany, which again has the Our Father and the Hail Mary, whereas the 2014 version does not include it. It has the poem Just for Today, which I have recited a couple times when praying. Midday prayers of the Angelus and Regina Calle. Evening prayers. And bedtime prayers. It does not have compline in this. It has bedtime prayers. Magnificat. And the night litany. Goes into the various prayers, which this is greatly condensed from the 2014, where you had a lot more options, where it's almost like a choose your own adventure devotional, whereas this is more to the point. Let's skip ahead a little bit to the Mass. Now, it does not open up with the preparatory prayers, it just opens up with the private prayers before Mass. We're jumping in to the Aspergus and the Vidi Aquam. Now, this version of the Mass, thankfully in here, is included. It follows the 1928 prayer book and the Anglican Missal. And that has the Confiteor, the Collects, but also the Collect for Purity, the short summary of the law, Kyrie, the Gloria in Excelsis Deo, which departs significantly from the prayer book tradition, because in the 28 prayer book and all preceding prayer books, the Gloria in Excelsis Deo is only said after communion, whereas in this it precedes communion. The Collect. It goes to the normal order of the Mass, Nicene Creed, Offertory, the prayer for the Church of Middleton, but broken down into sections so we can easily follow along. The confession from the prayer book, the exhortation, comfortable words, the Eucharistic prayer, which is broken down into sections so we can follow along rather than just a block of text as in the prayer book. Doxologies, post-communion, and it's only after the Mass do we have counsel for communicants and preparatory prayers, which is the same Psalms as the with the prayers of St. Ambrose and St. Thomas Aquinas, Virgin Mary, St. Joseph, the angels, the saints, to the saint that is being celebrated, and an intent before the Mass. And it has a Thanksgiving after communion. It has penance in here. I'm going to go over this. Opens up with an exhortation explaining confession, absolution. It has the examination of conscience based on the 7 deadly sins. Now, the form of confession it uses in this does not follow the prayer book. It is rather more in line with pre-Vatican II confession used in the Catholic Church. Now, a funny story is I went to a Catholic confession at my friend's parish, and I said this form of confession, as it had been several years since I had gone to a proper confession in a Catholic church. I happen to have this on hand, and I unfortunately confused the poor priest. The Litany of Penitence has the penitential psalms. Oh, and both, I forgot to mention in the 2014, but in here as well, it has benediction of the Blessed Sacrament. All right. Stations of the Cross. We're going to skip to devotions real quick, but before we jump into the Blessed Virgin Mary, the devotions to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. That's right. We have devotions to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. This is absent in the 2014 version, but was in the original versions. It has the prayers to the Sacred Heart, as the hymn, and the litany to the Sacred Heart. Now devotions to the Blessed Virgin. Immediately jumps right into the Rosary, and it follows the traditional 3 groupings of mysteries, minus without the Fatima prayers per usual, and antiphons, hymns to Our Lady, antiphons from the office before a statue or an icon of the Blessed Lady, the Subtum Presidium, the Memorare, the Litany, Litany to Our Lady of Sorrows, and jumps right into St. Joseph. It's more trimmed down. Now there's various litanies here, but we're going to skip to Holy Hour. Now this one, it offers 2 versions of Holy Hour. Version 1 and version 2. Version 1 starts off with the reading of the Agony in the Garden, and it walks through everything that has to be contemplated in the Holy Hour. I'm going to show you what I like with this one, what is absent in 2014. The act of consecration to the Sacred Heart of Jesus is present in the Holy Hour in this version of the St. Augustine's in edition 1. Holy Hour 2 is a little more different, in that it has preparatory prayers and jumps into the Blessed Sacrament. So, the options it gives, in my personal opinion, is edition 1 of Holy Hour. It's probably best used when you're doing the church visits for Gethsemane Watch on Maundy Thursday, whereas Holy Hour 2 can be used when you're sitting and praying in a adoration chapel. And it ends with a devotion and the index. Now, which one to buy? If you like having more options and are a fan of the 2019 or the 1979 Book of Common Prayer, I would use the 2014 edition. If you, however, are a traditional Catholic or you prefer to use the 1928 Book of Common Prayer or any of the other editions, I would recommend this. Now, my personal favorite has to be the 1967. I'm currently using the 1928 Book of Common Prayer, and I think this ultimately wins overall, as this is a lot more faithful to the original Anglo-Catholic movement. It's not as much of a choose-your-adventure in this. It's overall probably my favorite. Now, both of these are reasonably priced. You can find them on Amazon, or you can buy them from their publication. This one I got from Deus Publications, but you can buy it off of the Holy Cross website. Along with this one, they actually sell a bundle package, so you would be supporting a monastery.